Love reptiles? Don't miss this. If you're passionate about reptiles, amphibians, and everything cold-blooded, Reptiles magazine is a must-have. Each issue is packed with expert care tips, stunning photography, and the latest news in the reptile world. Whether you're a seasoned herpetologist or just starting your reptile journey, this magazine has something for you. Subscribe today and stay informed on the best ways to care for your scaly friends. For only $14.99 a year, you can step outside your algorithm and get exposure to things that you wouldn't normally see or learn about. My family reads Reptiles magazine, and you should too. Visit subscribe.reptilesmagazine.com to get started. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 57 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to J.D. McClain of Slithering Oddities.
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks for stopping by. So we were kind of chatting before we started the recording. You had kind of a late night last night?
Yeah, I did. This is my first year producing jungle carpets, which is amazing because, I've kept them over the years and I've loved them for a long time. Always been one of my favorite, visual species to look at. But yeah, I had a big female that dropped 25 good eggs for me last night. I was expecting close to 20, but 25 is pretty awesome. No slugs, She was pretty okay to get off the clutch. A little thrashy, not too bad. But yeah, super happy to produce some jungles or something I've been into since I was a kid, so it's amazing to actually get to work with this stuff and, reproduce it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're such a cool snake. And the variance from animal to animal, like now that I've gotten mine out of quarantine, out of their tubs and into cages, actually being able to go from cage to cage and look at their head structure, they're very individual. It's very easy to just see a yellow and black snake, but some of them have a more wider, bulky head. Others are a little bit more narrow, and then forget about the pattern too. It's so much more than just a black and yellow snake. You get so much variance with, black tipping in the yellow and the yellow tipping in the black, where they get that fishnet look, and some are just pure velvety black. And what a cool snake. I love jungles.
They are a cool snake. It's amazing to think that, kind of what we look at is not exactly what's really out there in the wild. It's just, but that's just goes to show you that if we work with something long enough and, work with the lines, that we can improve colors and things like that without even, genetic mutations and things like that. People were doing it for years before all the mutations started.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've gotten more into as time has gone on, is just the refinement of what is in the wild, where there's no morph. It's just a very refined version of what you'd find, out in the wild. That's such a cool thing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I like all the Python stuff. It's great.
Yeah. The and did you sell all your olive pythons?
No, I'll still have some floating around. I'm actually looking to work into some other projects, maybe by trading some olives or, selling some more and, getting some capital up to get into some other projects right now.
Nice.
I'm always looking for something to do, so I like breeding stuff. I keep close to 25 species, probably right around there right now, total.
Wow.
And yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of work, but it's enjoyable as well. If you love doing work, it doesn't seem as much like work. So
do you keep exclusively pythons, or do you keep any boas?
I keep a few species of boas. I mostly keep Australian and Indo python stuff, but we do keep Amazon tree boas. We have some T negative albino Colombian rainbows, and my partner Kit works with what was my old Rosie boa project. That's she has taken it over now and is rebuilding it because I had some really old animals and stuff. But yeah, those are the boa species we work with. We plan on working with some more. You know, we'd like to get into maybe like some Candoya and some West Indian island boas. Usually the boas and pythons for me, I like the weird stuff that not everybody like sees at a glance, you know, and just doesn't see the beauty right away. It takes a bit of a more trained eye to see it in some things, but I like all that weird stuff that everybody just casts off as, you know, just a non-mainstream pet, you know.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Part of that's
So
my growing up, probably.
so when did you what got you into keeping snakes? When did it all start?
Uh, when I was a little kid, like a very little kid, I had like this was like early '80s. I had like a little anole when I was like 4 years old, and that probably is what spurred my big interest in reptiles. And we, you know, we'd find garter snakes in the yard and stuff like that. Um, but then once I got into like adolescence, I started kind of figuring out like you could actually keep this stuff and you could keep different stuff, and it wasn't, you know, garter snakes or, you know, something from Ohio where I'm from, you know. So you know, I started looking into things like green iguanas and monitors and ball pythons and boa constrictors, and then eventually I had enough interest in it. My mother ended up getting me a subscription to Reptiles magazine, and that just, you know, it just blew from there. You know, start seeing emerald tree boas and jungle carpets and all this other stuff that you've never seen in these bright colors, and that really gets your wheels turning if you think it's cool. You know, so um, that's where a lot of it started. And you know, I had a few pets, and then I got into like graduated high school and I was working in some pet stores. I worked in like a pet land, and then I worked in like a reptile specialty store in Columbus called Reptile City back in the day that was all pretty much reptiles, a few aquatic fish. So I kind of cut my teeth in that industry and gained a lot of knowledge there. And then I started keeping and acquiring and breeding. And then, you know, over the years that has shifted for me. I got out of some projects when I was young that I wish I wouldn't have. And then balls got popular and I was breeding quite a bit of those with a couple other things at that time. And then I kind of got bored with that. So I jumped out of that. And now I'm back to breeding the stuff I really like again, which is awesome. And don't plan on stopping this anytime soon or changing it up. So
Nice. What are some of the like what are your top 3 favorite species to work with?
oh, McClain pythons, number one, olive pythons, and wow, man, number 3 is a tough one because it could be so many for me. I am liking working with Fuscus a lot. I like Liasis a lot. My second favorite genus would be Anteracia. So I do like working with Anteracia a lot. The Stimsons are one of my favorites. Spotteds, Children's. So third, I'd probably have to put like wheat belt Stimsons in there for me. They're just super cool, man.
Damn, man, we got a lot to talk about then. Because I'm actually I want olives really bad, but I feel like I don't have the space. I feel like they get too big compared to Maclots.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. They're a little bit
yes,
bigger.
yeah, and it's like I had this conversation the other day. I'm like, which one? I've been having it with multiple people, numerous people. I reach out and I'm like, what do you keep your olives in? What do you keep your Maclots in? How do they differ in personality? All that. So shoot, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I mean, how do you keep your
Uh,
olives compared to your Maclots?
Olives compared to Maclots, I'm going to give Maclots some more height than I'm going to give olives. You know, I feel they're a little more climby than the olives are, especially in the adult size. The little olives climb quite a bit and stuff, and they'll just go everywhere because they're super curious. But like the bigger, heavier olives, I notice they tend to stay a little lower in the enclosure. It's probably not great to move all that stuff around everywhere all day. So that would be the biggest difference for me. A little more floor space on the olives, obviously, than what I would give, an adult Mac lots or something like that. With the Macs, I feel like the height is a little more important and the floor space a little more on the olives. My olives are in 8x4x2s.
Holy crap, dude.
Yeah, like I built it myself. I'll show you. You can kind of see it here behind me to the right. Those
Oh
are
my God.
my olive python cages right there. That brown cage.
So that's 8 long and 4 deep.
Yep, that's 4 deep. 4 deep's a little bit of overkill. I used to keep an Argus monitor in it for several years, and then he passed away, and I needed something for my olives that were growing up, so I just ran another sheet of plywood down the middle and split it into 2 cages.
Wow.
But yeah, the floor space is going to be key to breeding them. I've talked to like some other people and watch videos and stuff on people that have been breeding them for a while, and almost all of them say that floor space is the key. A lot of people think it's like outdoor exposure, and that probably does help, you know what I mean? But my olives have actually never been exposed to the outdoors, and they breed fairly regularly for me. I just think giving them enough room to do their thing is the key.
Do they need a pretty big temperature drop? Like how are you approaching breeding them? Is it
most of my Aussie stuff, I try to just take it to like in the depth of the winter, like I try to take it to about 68 degrees at night.
okay?
That tends to work with most things for me. I can get away with a little warmer with Anteracia stuff if I really want to, just because it's so prolific. But I pretty much just set everything to like gradually drop to 68 at night. And that's what I do with the olives. When I first started breeding them, I wasn't quite going that deep, and they were too active for me. I knew they weren't right, so adjusted a little bit. That seems to work well. I've heard of people dropping olives even lower. I haven't needed to, 68 seems to do the trick for me. Who was it? I was talking to somebody else that breeds them recently, and they said the exact same thing. They dropped them to 68. So it must be a pretty good temp to work. But yeah, pretty much all the Aussie stuff, I kind of cool it about the same way, except for the Bredeli that I breed.
How cold do you get them?
Bredeli I take down to like the low to mid 50s for a couple weeks at night. Which is scary if you've never done that with a python, especially the first time. But I do like the Bredeli. I've bred them before without taking them that low too, but it seems like they breed a lot better if you take them down, and the fertility is a little bit higher.
Oh, interesting. So you actually get like a better yield, like a better clutch size?
Yeah. Usually you'll see that your male and female are a little more active too. I've noticed, I've bred them with just cooling them down to like 68, you know what I mean? And that's worked, and I've got good clutches that were totally fine out of them. But with Bredeli, I think the lower you can take them for a couple of weeks, the better. That sperm's going to become more viable. They have like the largest temperature ranges of any python. So, the highest highs, the lowest lows. So they're pretty hardy. They're pretty tolerant.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's the low temp drops is, I'm trying to, kind of get used to that myself, because I'm going to be keeping diamonds outside. So I'm going to be really cooling them down during the winter. And, yeah, it seems like, a lot of people keep them down into the 40s, which is,
yeah.
And I mean, shoot, like talking to people that are in Australia, they're getting down into the low 30s,
Wow.
So it's just, yeah, it's nuts. Obviously giving them a insulated hide seems like is probably the best way to go about ensuring their safety and everything. But yeah, it's such a weird, it's a hard to grasp concept, getting a snake that cold, especially a python.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have diamonds. I love them. They're like really one of my favorite snakes to look at. Eventually, I'll have some. They're on my list, but right now, I don't have them. Where'd you get
Yeah.
yours from?
So I got two from Brandon Wheeler, and I'm getting another from David Feinberg, who has
Okay.
a 21 or a 22 male that I'm going to be getting from him. So and then I plan on expanding that out, but I'm learning to walk before I start to run. So how
I
long
really
does
like
it take? What was that?
I really like the San Diego Zoo line stuff with the diamonds, man.
Oh yeah.
I love the dark look.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about the diamonds is, me personally, I like the lighter animals, the more
Okay. The
more of the
yellow.
look that yeah, more of the look that you see in the Australian
Uh-huh.
animals, like a lot of the Australian collections, they're really yellow and really light.
Yeah.
Uh but it's kind of crazy. It seems like you can kind of get both of those looks out of the same clutch potentially,
Mm,
where you'll get light ones and you'll get darker ones too.
that's pretty cool.
And I think David Kelly saw that in one of his previous clutches, which is yeah, it's kind of mind blowing. There's something for everyone with diamonds.
Yeah.
But so how long does it take for a olive python? Like how fast do they grow? How fast do they need to be moved into a 8 foot long enclosure?
Uh,
Because obviously that's a huge enclosure.
they're not going to grow as fast as like one of your true giants, like your berms, rocks, retics, anacondas. They're not going to grow at that rate unless you're overfeeding them.
Mm.
I kind of feed them like a carpet, honestly, maybe a little bit more when they're young. But like babies, I feed them weekly, and like once in a 2 month span, they'll probably have a week off, even, you know what I mean, where they don't get fed that week. So they'll probably eat like 7 times in 2 months, 8 times depending on the number of weeks. And then I just kind of feed them accordingly from there. I don't push them real hard. I try to start them out on like usually I'll start them out on hopper mice if they'll take them. If they won't, I start them out on quail, which is a tip I picked up from somebody else that breeds them, Dennis McNamara, a really good guy.
Oh yeah,
Um,
love that guy. That's
uh,
actually who I was talking to about olives and Max.
yeah, absolutely. But I just met him at Tinley actually last week for the first time. I mean, we've corresponded online for the past few years, but yeah, super good guy. And yeah, I just kind of I feed them like most Aussie stuff. I'm not in a hurry to like raise this Aussie stuff up because like you don't really need to pump it with food. I think we get a little crazy with the food on our animals sometimes. Snakes should be lean and muscular, not pudgy, really. So, but yeah, like once they become juveniles, I usually feed them like 3 out of 4 weeks. You know what I mean? And I'll feed them like a rat pup or an adult mouse, not alive, an adult mouse. But once they get 3-4 feet, then you're going to start seeing they're going to start hitting weaned rats, small rats, and that's when they'll actually really start gaining some size. I mean, I've got a 2-year-old here that's like 4 feet, so it's not like it's some massive growth spurt like people do with their Burmese or whatever. It all depends on you as the keeper. If you're feeding them right and keeping them at that nice, like, great body weight, then I don't think that an olive is going to grow super fast on you. They won't reach sexual maturity really until they're 6 years of age anyway.
Oh
So
wow.
if you're getting into olives and you're like, oh, this is going to be a quick breeding project, you're way wrong, because it's just not going to happen. They're just a slower breeder than most other python species. It's not like a ball python or something like that you can get to size in 4 to 5 years pretty easily and, be getting clutches out of. Uh, my first clutch was when she was 6. I bought my animals from Tom Crutchfield back in the day. I bought a trio in 2012 from him, and I only have 2 of that trio still, but I have some other ones I've raised up. And he was the one that told me at the time, he said, your animals will have to be at least 6 years old before you can breed them. He said they will not breed before that.
Hmm.
So 6 years I bred them. got a clutch, 30 duds, all slug, completely slugged out. 2 years later, I got a clutch. Not much survived out of it. That was the year that I learned that olive python eggs are extremely sensitive to moisture. So got them, like if it, and it can spread quick in them, I notice. And then 2 years after that, I had a little better clutch. And then, this last season, I had my best clutch of them yet. And, the incubation is dialed in now and getting things worked out, Unfortunately, with some of this stuff, it's trial and error for a lot of us because we don't have a ton of information all the time.
So the 30 slugs, what do you think caused that?
Probably wasn't cold enough.
Okay.
I probably did. That was before I was cooling to 68 with my olives. I was cooling them down to like the low to mid 70s. I'm guessing it wasn't cool enough. I always fear first timer girls. Like I was saying earlier in our messages, this jungle behind me that laid last night, she was 8 years old and nobody had ever bred her. I took these animals in. His wife was having some health issues and he just wanted to unload them, and they're super great looking jungles. So I was like, yeah, I'll take them, but I just, first timer girls, I always worry about them slugging out because I've seen it a couple times. I used to see it in balls a little bit when I bred them. Like some of my first time girls would just slug out. You're like, oh, what the hell, man?
How wild is that to get 25 good eggs?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I'm like searching, looking for slugs. And my friend was in town from Michigan, and he never gets to see snakes lay eggs when he's here, so he was all excited. And he's like, it looks like you got 21. I was like, there's more than 21 there. I was like, I already put 13 in the other tub, and we got 9 in here right now. So I still got a few to go. But
man,
but yeah, great clutch. Super happy about it. I also should have a fuscus laying pretty soon here, I believe. Which that'll be the first time I bred those too. So I'm super happy about that.
That's awesome. Now, well, hold on. Let me write down this question, and we'll get. I want to get to the water pythons, but the moisture. What happened with the eggs? And the moisture, was it too humid in the incubation box? And then how did you remedy that? And what went wrong? Did they just mold up? Was the moisture falling on the eggs?
Basically, yeah. The moisture was just building up so fast, and I was kind of, I'd bred some things, but I hadn't bred a ton of Aussie stuff at this point. I think just coastals and brettles. But I just noticed that like anytime like anything would just drip on them, man, anything would just go green. So I'm wiping lids and stuff, and eventually, I got it worked out and realized, you can't incubate these like you incubate ball python eggs. Like ball python eggs are like indestructible pretty much, it seems. But like the Aussie stuff, I've noticed that it's kind of touchy, especially early on. So last year what I did was I was looking at some things, and it was like some Woma breeders, and I've bred Womas a couple times, but haven't had great success with Womas. They seem to be a pain in my neck. I just get a couple good eggs here and there and they hatch. But so I noticed that in a conversation that these guys were cracking their lids on their Womas when they first put them in the tub. So last year, that's what I did to help cut down some of the early on moisture with my olives in case I wasn't there, if it dripped or something like that, or so I didn't have to be down the incubator every 10 minutes with a paper towel. So that seemed to work. I left them cracked for about a week just at the corner. I left, that's everybody, when you incubate, that's not what you think about. You don't want usually air gaps, but I did. I pulled a corner. I left a little bit of airflow there, and that seemed to work a lot better for me. And I hatched a lot more last year.
Right on. Now,
dead eggs.
I wonder. So so this the box that you have the eggs in doesn't have any ventilation, right? No holes or anything like that.
There's one vent hole at the front corner.
Okay. So it has a little bit of airflow, but not enough to stop that condensation on the lid.
Yeah, I keep 2 air holes in most of them, but I usually keep one of them covered. You know what I mean? And then if I feel like it's not getting enough air, I'll just pull that piece of electrical tape or what I have over the other hole and just open up the other hole so it can get some more airflow to it.
And are you just going based off of the amount of condensation in the box?
Pretty much, yeah, yeah. I mean, I like to see it build on the lid, but you know, you don't want to get it to where it's dripping everywhere. So
Yeah. So the thing I have in my head, I think I heard Ryan Young talk about this on a podcast, was putting a piece of like a dowel at the back end of the incubator and angling the box so that way the condensation as it builds just rolls down to the bottom and doesn't drip onto the eggs.
yeah, right on. That's a good idea. I
Yeah.
have another person. I don't know if you know John Chosmer. He's a boa breeder out of Ohio here, but he said he has a friend that takes like plastic somehow and like basically domes it
Hmm.
over his eggs. That way, when his lid drips, it like runs off the plastic down into the substrate, basically, which I thought was an
Interesting.
interesting idea.
Yeah, I guess if you can do anything to give it a way to run away from the eggs, you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, yeah. I actually switched incubation mediums this year. I switched to water orbs.
I
Um,
saw that. I saw that in your picture on Instagram. What the hell are those things? They look like they'd be
uh,
some kind of a perfume or something, like you know.
they're for plants. Like you like add water to them. Excuse me, my throat's scratchy today.
You're good.
Um, but you basically use them for plants and they keep your plants hydrated. You fill them up, they expand, they got water, and then you know as they dry out, you add more water, they expand again. So I saw some of the Aussie breeders doing it this year, and I talked to a guy named Peter Staten, who's a big Antaresia breeder over there, and he was basically explaining it to me. But he said a lot of people are using them over there and stuff, and I mean it makes sense if you're using like suspension incubation because you can basically get these orbs as wet as you want, you know. So there's moisture there, and you don't have to worry about it touching the eggs. So and then
Hmm.
as they start to dry a little bit, you can just add a little water and they just perk back up. Super easy.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And what kind of an incubator do you use? Like, what is your setup for that?
Um, my incubator is a walk-in. Um, when I
Baller.
bought my place here, I added it in because I had somebody around that was crafty with construction. So basically, you walk in and there's some Rubbermaid racks, you know, like Rubbermaid shelf system. There's a ceiling fan at the top, just a standard small ceiling fan. And then I run it off of a Ranco thermostat and an oil filled radiator, and that's about it.
Right on.
Um, you want to make
That's
sure you're doing that your door is sealed well, obviously at the bottom and the top, so you're not getting airflow in and out. But tends to work pretty well for me. I've been using it for several years. Hatched several ball pythons, brettles out in it, children's, other Antaresia, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, bull snakes, other colubrids.
that's awesome. So, uh, that is there's so much that it's you know, because I haven't incubated any eggs yet, so it's I'm getting all these inputs and I'm trying to figure out the
It's
way
the
I
toughest part to me, honestly. I think the rest of it's fairly straightforward. The incubating eggs is always what ends up driving me mad.
well, and especially since everybody does it and a lot of people do it successfully, so it's kind of you're trying to pick out the most successful way. You know, you're trying to learn
Yeah,
from everybody else's mistakes and you know
yeah.
and try to take that. So yeah, it's luckily I have some time. You know, I'm not in any rush. But yeah, having an actual incubation room, man, that seems like if I can get my snake building, I would love to have an actual walk-in room.
Anybody can probably do it too if you have the right space. You know, if you have like a big closet in your house, you can have a walk-in incubator. You know, it's as long as you seal the doors up good and everything, it's gonna work for you. So, I mean, I'm sure some people probably even done it in like a pantry or something like that, you know, in their house. But that's where I used to incubate crested gecko eggs. I used to throw them in my pantry on the top shelf. It took forever for them to hatch though at that temperature. I mean, you're talking like 100 and some days. Uh,
Wow.
uh, but uh, but yeah, I mean, incubators are tough because it's not like there's an affordable one out there that's manufactured for most people.
Yeah.
Most of them are a little higher end, like like your Wilbank stuff or whatever. But anybody can make one. You just have to use a little creativity and have a little know-how. A lot of people make them out of old drink coolers or refrigerators or
Yeah.
stuff like that. That's usually fairly easy to do. You drill a hole to run your wire or run your heat tape and your fan, and you're pretty much there. As long as it runs, and you got a thermostat, you'll be good. But yeah, I mean, a walk-in's the same way. You kind of just set it up the same way, only use a bigger heating element.
Yeah. And what temperature are you achieving in that walk-in?
I like to keep it right about 88.5.
Okay.
The lower areas stay a little lower than that. Like it actually worked out real good a couple of years ago when we incubated bull snake eggs because we had all these python eggs in here at like 88, but the floor sat at like 85 nonstop. So we just put them right on the floor and we hatched all 14 of them.
Nice.
But yeah, I tend to shoot for like 88. I give it like a 1 degree variance. It'll go anywhere from 87 to 89 during. That doesn't seem to affect it much at all.
That's awesome that you kind of have that gradient from top to bottom, so you can kind of pick and choose where you put stuff. Now, if you put in like more fans, would you get a more consistent temperature the whole way through if you wanted it?
I would imagine so. It's a fairly tight room. You could maybe fit 3 to 4 people in that room the way it sits right now. So they'd be right up against each other. And the fan covers most of the ceiling, so it pretty much moves it pretty good.
What are the dimensions of the room?
I would say it's about 4 foot by 8 foot, like 4 foot wide by about 8 foot long.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's a pretty sweet setup.
yeah. But yeah, if I usually leave my ceiling fan on around medium. If I notice like maybe I'm getting too much humidity, I might kick it up to high, to dry things out a little bit more or something. But yeah, the only bad part is your ceiling fan goes out or something like that. You got to figure out something for a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't had that happen yet, but
do you have like a floor fan or something on standby so you could just plug it in and throw it in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've always got stuff like that around.
Yeah. Now, what is the humidity at in there? Do you track that? Do you regulate it?
I really don't. I just track the tubs. I just look at the tubs, and basically, if that tub's starting to build moisture on that lid, you're between 90 and 100 right there. That's a pretty good sign. So, yeah, I just kind of track that, and I do keep a hygrometer in there, but I don't check it religiously or anything like that. I just make sure the eggs look good. I'm a big checker, like when it comes to like breeding snakes. When my females, it doesn't even matter how far out they are from laying. When they're gravid, I check on them twice a day. When I know they're gravid, I'm checking on them at least twice a day. Then I go, when I have eggs in the incubator, I usually check twice a day. I lift the lid at least once a day to exchange air usually. But yeah, I think it's super important to check on your animals when they're in a reproductive state. Complications can happen, or eggs can turn bad in a hurry if you're not paying attention, things like that. So, but yeah, that's just pretty much my routine.
Do you do you separate the eggs, or is it, or do you just take the entire clump and just plop it in?
I rarely take the entire clump and put it in.
Okay.
They would have to be some eggs that had been sitting there for a couple days or something for me to do that. Or by the time I got that carpet last night, the eggs weren't warm, so she had laid few hours earlier, probably. And they were a little tough, but I got them all apart. You have to be, it's not for the faint at heart, and you have to be really gentle. It's a lot of push and pull, give and take, you know what I mean? Real gentle, like nudging, But usually I can get them all apart pretty easily as long as I haven't been sitting there too long.
That sounds
Um,
terrifying.
I like to take them apart because my fear is if one molds, it can spread mold, So, so yeah, I tend to like to take them apart.
Mm. What about maternal incubation? Would you ever try that out, or have you?
I will here at some point. I've been thinking about doing it with like an Anteracia here at some point. I'm not sure if it'll be this year because I got some things I really want to produce this year that I don't want to flub up. But yeah, I'm sure that I'll probably I have like all kinds of Eastern Stimsons. I'll probably just plop an Eastern Stimson's female on one like next year or something and see what happens.
Nice. With the Maclots pythons, how do you keep them? What size enclosure are they in?
I keep most of my Macs. They're kind of younger, so they're in like 4x2x2s. Bigger ones, I like to go a little taller though, like 4 feet. Like I have a big roadie female. But yeah, that mostly works for them, especially when they're smaller. What I do want to do soon with my Macs though, and a lot of my stuff is I'm gonna start building some of my own enclosures here. And I would like to have like some nice tall stuff for carpets, Mac lots. I'm talking like 6, 7 foot tall cages where they can
Wow.
perch up somewhere and I can really look at them and really, really enjoy them. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that was like one of my first loves with Mac lots, like the Columbus Zoo here has had like a bunch of them forever. And like I always used to see them there when I was younger and when I didn't have them and stuff and was into them. And, just seeing them like on those branches, and even in scrubs, they always had a couple cool scrubs there too, man. And just seeing that stuff is just great. And when you look at it, it's just like a peaceful, serene thing. It just brings peace to your mind when you see things like that. It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I just got some 4x2x2.5 tall enclosures, and the jungles are in there, and I love it. I love it. Even that extra 6 inches compared to the 4x2x2 enclosures,
Yeah,
it makes such a huge difference.
it does.
It's and just from a gradient standpoint, is that they can go all the way up in the branches, and the way that the heat accumulates in those enclosures, it's like 84 degrees up high in the branches. And then
Uh,
down in the corner behind the plant in that little cool hide area, it's like 78, 79 degrees. And then over on their stone slate basking platform, it's like 92 degrees, right? So they have like this huge range where they can pick and choose whatever they want. If they just ate a big rat, they can go into that warm hide underneath the slate. They often go and lay on that right after the lights have gone out, because it's holding that heat, so they go and they curl up on that, and they kind of get some extra heat, and then they're out, hunting for the night, so it's so much fun having that extra gradient. And I really think, like my Timors, I initially was thinking the female would need a larger enclosure, and I was thinking length. But with the way that they perch up all the time, I'd really like to do maybe a 4x2x4, and
uh-huh.
just give her a bunch of perching options and a ton of branches everywhere, and
Yeah,
make it really sturdy,
those are cool pythons. Those are one that I don't own that are on my list as well.
They are cool. They'd be so much cooler if they didn't pee on me.
That's what I hear. I hear they're pretty flighty and pretty bathroomy.
Yeah, unfortunately. And it's crazy. Every single time they'll wrap their tail, like the very end of their tail, around my smartwatch and then pee onto the band. Like without fail. It's like their go-to move.
Like, this is a good place to pee.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that much about them for years. I mean, being in Ohio, like I've vended like the Hamper shows for years, and I don't know if you know them, but Don Hamper was like the first person to breed Timor pythons in captivity.
Mm.
But they always had them on their table for years, and now I like regret never like saving up the money and buying some of them because they're kind of tough to find here and there anymore. And when you do, they're not cheap. So
Yeah, especially captive bred
yeah,
is very hard to find.
yeah,
Yeah, you can find the farm raised, but yeah, I mean my trio came from Ryan, and yeah, I'm grateful to have them. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, he's so awesome. He's a great breeder.
yeah, and they're you know they are what they are, and they're more of a hands off animal. You know, they're not
Yeah.
one that I'm gonna take out and handle and everything. Which so with the olives and the Macs, would you say that from a handleability standpoint that they're kind of on the same page, or is one better than the other? I've heard that their feeding
Overall,
response is out of control.
overall, olives are better,
Okay.
but that's because you have the juvenile Maclots and the baby Maclots. Um, Olives, I tend to find, are at their worst in their juvenile phase. Maclots have the baby and the juvenile phase before they start breaking out of that behavior. So with that, I would put olives at a little nicer, and some juvenile olives aren't bad. But what I notice is with juvenile olives, and I was just telling somebody this the other day, like I'll be handling a juvenile olive and it'll be all fine and dandy, and he'll be cruising around. And next thing I know, I start to see him like start to open up a little bit, looking at my skin. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? You know what I mean? I'll move around and disorient him or whatever. But I have been bit once or twice like that from olives, and it's usually when they're in like that 4 to 5 foot range. Once they get to like adulthood, they're usually pretty good. I mean, they're cranky in sheds. Leave your olives alone when they're in shed. They will get pissed at you if you start messing with them. They go super blue, man. Just one of the bluest eyes I've ever seen of a snake in shed. It's just really, really milky. Max, once you get, everybody gives up on Max too fast. Everybody gets a Mac when it's a baby or a juvenile, and they're like, this thing's terrible and it bites, and that's what they do at that age. But once they start like hitting sexual maturity, you'll just see like a switch flip in Macklot's pythons where they don't. I mean, they're still strongly food motivated animals. You don't just want to pop open your Macklot's enclosure and start waving your hand in its face. That's going to get your response. But once they're out and stuff, once they've hit sexual maturity, they're a lot smarter and less randy than they were when they were young. So I like them both a lot. The look of the Macklots puts them a little over olives for me, just to look at them visually. But I like the way the olives look a lot too. And the olives are the smartest, most curious pythons I've worked with, bar none. I haven't worked with everything, obviously, but I've worked with quite a few things. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of people I've talked to talk about how smart and curious olives are.
Yeah, they're and the size aspect too is kind of a selling point. Just what an impressive size they can get up to.
Yeah,
It's yeah, it's tough. It's a tough one. I want to get into. Go ahead.
Good.
I want to get into Liasis at some point. It's just kind of I keep dancing back and forth, and I was talking to Dennis. I've talked to Owen. I've talked to you. It's like I keep going back and forth, and I even have a local guy that has a Roy Stewart Tierra de Morelia, who has he has a female olive right now, and it's like, oh man, they're so pretty.
They're beautiful animals, like when you really get to staring at one, you're just like, this thing's amazing, the really small scales on the body. And then they have like the big shield scales on top of the head, which is super contrasting, and just the overall like purpley iridescent sheen of the animal. That's what sells Liasis for me right there. That purpley iridescent sheen that they have is, I think honestly, a lot of Liasis look just as good as white lips or rainbows with iridescence, especially under the right lighting. I think like Rhode Island Macklots and like Fuscus are just over the top iridescence. If you like iridescence, those animals have it. I'd say olives and Macklots though are both a little better than Savus or Fuscus. in my experience.
As far as temperament?
Yeah, I have an old Savu, and she's not too bad outside of the enclosure, but you can't, you can't reach your hand in there at all, or make any mistakes, or she'll make you pay a little bit. And Fuscus are just kind of, some of them are just kind of wiry and thrashy and flighty.
Mm.
But I love them anyway, so
Yeah, I got to see a water python yesterday. Dr. Stephen Tillis has some, and he was showing those off, and yeah, they're beautiful. They kind of have that. It almost reminds me of like a piranha's belly. Like they have that kind of red orange color coming up from their belly. Yeah. So cool looking.
Yeah.
Now, in your experience,
whole belly. I love the yellow bellies on Fuscus.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. And they're pretty small, right? In comparison.
Yeah, they're not a huge python. They stay a little smaller than Maclots, I believe, or roughly the same size anyway. I think a little smaller. I think they're like a 5 to 6 foot animal.
Yeah. And what about, so they're called water pythons, right? And yeah. I was under the impression that they like water, but I've heard a lot of kind of back and forth on this. Dr. Tillis said that they're very aquatic. But then I've heard people too that say that they don't even like go near their water bowl, even if it's a water bowl big enough for them to get into.
Mine don't soak. If they're soaking, you probably want to check them for mites.
Really?
I've never seen them soak. You know what I mean? I was always, the things I always read in the past, I think it maybe was like Pythons of the World Volume 1 by the Barkers or something like that. I could be wrong that I'm quoting here, but I know I read something that said they are often found near bodies of water.
Mm.
So that's why they were referred to as the water python, which technically, I mean, any snake could be found near a body of water. They're going to go there because there's prey, and water. So, but that was what I had read, but, I'm sure that I've seen pictures of them in the wild, like in water and stuff. So I'm sure they utilize it,
Yeah.
But I don't see mine ever like, it's not like an anaconda or something where you'll just find it soaking in the water bowl. Yeah, it's not common at all.
Okay. All right. Interesting. It's a very deceiving name then.
A little bit. Like the Timor python.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not found on Timor. Is this, so behind you, is this your jungle female?
You can see she's cruising back here. She's pissed off at me, probably looking for her eggs.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting enclosure. What size is that? It looks like it was a tote that's been converted into an enclosure.
They came with the animals, actually. When I went to get the animals, he wanted to get rid of everything, and these were the enclosures that he had them in. Yeah, it's basically 2 big totes flipped on top of one of each other with a couple sliding door sets installed. The enclosure itself, I believe, is like 3 by 3 by 2 or something like that. So It does have some height to it. Eventually I'll get them out of these and put them in something else. But this was our first year breeding them, and I didn't want to move her out of her typical home because I knew that wouldn't be great for breeding. I have some other caging that's waiting in the wings that really doesn't have much in it that I'm waiting to set up back here. And then we'll move some stuff around here. But she is definitely active today, and I'll probably get her a meal tomorrow. She'll probably take a meal. But today I think she's really cruising and trying to figure out where her egg box went.
Yeah, poor girl.
Yeah, that's the worst part. I was telling my partner kid earlier, I was like, that's the worst part about me for like incubating eggs. I feel bad that I'm taking the eggs away from mom. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder what she's thinking the whole time. Like what happened to my eggs? I worked so hard.
Yeah. This bald monkey came in here and took my eggs. Yeah,
the
she's
water
definitely
human came in and stole my baby.
She's definitely cruising. It looks like her body composition's pretty good though.
Yeah, she kept some good weight. She was a bit hefty. That was another. She wasn't hefty, but like, he had fed her pretty well, like she wasn't obese, but she was thicker than I would have kept a female for breeding. So I did try to slim her down a little bit when I first got her, and I think that maybe helped out. But that was another reason I was maybe a little worried about slugging out. Sometimes your females that are a little overweight, that can be an issue,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
everything went great. So
seeing her cruise around, it reminds me of my spotted python. She has been so active lately. She got moved into an enclosure as well out of a tub. And I mean, maybe she always cruised in the tub, like you don't know because you can't see in there.
Yeah.
But man, all day long, she's out cruising her enclosure. And then usually at the end of the day is when she goes to bed. I don't know if she realizes that she's supposed to be nocturnal, but yeah,
I like the spotteds a lot too.
What do you work with spotted pythons?
Oh yeah, I have granites, stripes, Cape Yorks, and was it last year? I think it was last year. Yeah, I produced a stripe that is 100% het granite.
Oh, wow.
And then I also have some babies that I'm pretty sure are low expression stripes that are het granite too. But I'm just holding all that stuff back.
Wow.
I talked to Justin Julander a few years ago. Maybe somebody's done it by now, but I don't think anybody's crossed them yet here in the U.S. And it might not even look like anything, to be honest with you. The granite might totally wash that stripe out, and it might be nothing. But I'm going to try it and see what happens.
Who did you get your stripes from?
Actually, there was a guy that lived close here, and he was into some Aussie stuff. He was about the only other person I knew in Central Ohio that was really into Aussie stuff. And his stripes had come from Justin. His granite stuff came from Ryan. And I bought him out on a bunch of stuff. It was like all that spotted stuff I just mentioned. The Cape Yorks had come from someone named Ryan Dumas, he said. And then he had a bunch of Eastern Stimsons from Nick's line that I bought. And I think that was mostly it. I think I did spotteds and Stimsons mostly. He did have some children's stuff that I didn't end up buying, even though I had children's. But yeah, I bought this guy out of like 20 animals basically all at the same time. I had like 25 animals in quarantine for like freaking 4 months. It was pretty rough. But yeah, I mean, I knew he had good stuff, and I knew he had a good eye for things. And he was the only other person I knew in this area that had been breeding bredli and stuff, which I'd been doing for a little bit. But yeah, he just hit me up and he said, "Hey, I'm getting out. I'm getting ready to have a baby." And yeah, all of his stuff was like hatchling size. And one of the Stimsons, one of them was an adult trio. Those were the largest animals. But yeah, I basically just had to raise everything up for a year or two. And then most of it was ready to breed. The only thing I haven't really hit on yet are my Cape Yorks, and they're kind of driving me nuts. I thought I was going to hit this year, but it's not looking good so far. But yeah, like I have like 3 clutches of Eastern Stimsons getting ready to happen here. Probably 2 to 3 spotted clutches, children's clutches. I also, I think 4 or 5 years ago, 5 years ago, I hatched out some children's pythons, and I'd been hatching out of this pair for at least 4 or 5 clutches, and I popped a pure patternless, like red animal out of the clutch.
What?
She's over here. I think she's gravid again this year. I do have offspring out of her, nothing that's patternless like her, but last year I bred her to a litter mate, and they produced some pretty weird stuff.
You're gonna have to send me pictures.
Like T-positive, weird looking stuff. And like the pictures I take of it don't do it justice, it's like anything else, but it's weird looking. There's some of it out there. I post pretty frequently on Facebook and like US Anteracia addicts, Anteracia freaks, children's pygmy spotted, Stimson's pythons groups, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I call her Mango. That's just her name. But yeah, she just popped out as an anomaly, and I've bred them again, and I haven't got anything. Her siblings have some weird stuff happening with them. Like they're real, like milky, caramely looking, glazy at times and stuff. And bred to some other animals. They produce some weirder looking stuff. Like I thought maybe they were, I thought maybe the mom had been like crossed out to spot it or something. Cause my children's weren't lineaged. I picked them up at a trade. I think I traded 3 baby pinstripe ball pythons for an adult breeder pair. And the male, he looks right. The female's slightly different looking, but she doesn't really look like a Spotteds or Stimsons that much either. Um, but when I was producing some offspring from those to other things, I was getting these things. They almost look like Cape York children eye, something weird going on. I was calling them Australian bat eaters just for the heck of it, because back in the day we had the Borneo bat eater. I was just kind of making a joke out of it. And then every once in a while somebody will come up to me and they'll be like, I really want to get one of those Australian bat eaters. And I'll go, where'd you hear that term at? Because I just made it up to be a goon, kind of. And they're like, oh, it was probably you then. I was like, yeah, it probably was. But I don't know, like it's definitely popping some weird stuff out, man. Like just irregular patterns. The babies I produced last year, I got 4 babies going. One of them just looks pretty normal, and the other 3 are like orange as crap with the super reduced tail patterning and patterning up into the mid body reducing and all kinds of stuff. So nobody's ever really proved the patternless children eye out here yet. But I think I might be getting close. I think I might be getting close on it. I think I've definitely got something weird happening there that if it doesn't produce patternless, it's going to produce something weird somewhere down the line. If not, but yeah, I'll just have to raise these up, and work that back. Unfortunately, it's a long project. I think it's probably a simple recessive thing. I've talked to a couple people in Australia, Peter Birch especially. It looks just like the patternless animals that they have over there. It's got like this reddish brown tone, and like under light, it's got like these copper reflections everywhere in it. Really cool looking animal. But yeah, it looks a lot like theirs, and they have them everywhere over there. So, but hopefully I can prove it out. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. Well, are your do you have lineage info on your Cape Yorks? Are they're not too common or readily available in the hobby, right?
When I bought them, I tried to get a hold of the guy recently, and he didn't answer me. Actually, I was told they came from a breeder named Ryan Dumas, which I've heard the name, but I don't know him. And I inquired, just to check for my own, lineages, and he didn't respond back, unfortunately. Everybody else I talked to that I bought the animals from, like Justin and Ryan and Nick, they're like, oh yeah, I think I remember that guy, so, and the stuff looks right, like Ryan's granite stuff is often like very reduced pattern or even patternless, he tells me. And, these granites, they pop animals with very low patterning a lot of the time. Yeah, so the guy had a good collection, and I'm apt to believe everything he said for sure. But you never really know, I guess. But yeah, it would have been nice to find out a little bit about those Cape Yorks. They look the part. One of them has the more darker patterning, and one of them has the more tan patterning. But it'd be great to produce those, because I know that not a ton of people are, and I think they're the coolest spotted. Honestly, the Cape Yorks. They get a little bigger, from what I understand. And I just think they're cool looking.
Yeah, they are. They are.
They're nicer than my other spotteds too, actually.
Are they really?
Not a lot, but a little.
So my girl, once she went from her tub into her enclosure, she won't bite me now. And I've tried, I straight up, I put my hand in front of her face, and that used to get me a bite and wrap 100% of the time.
Yeah,
when she was in her tub. And now that she's in the enclosure, she's, like I said, very active, very curious. If I even touch the door, she's at the door. She'll cruise over, and I'll put my hand in front of her, and she'll tongue flick like she's going to bite and wrap. And then she's just like, nope, not food, and kind of turns and goes and does her thing.
Good.
That's yeah.
Good. My entries are terrible, but I don't really handle a lot either. So that doesn't help with that. So,
well,
mine just want to eat everything.
Yeah. And I guess I probably put a decent amount of work in with her as far as handling and interaction, just because, my son loves her so much, because it's such an attractive snake to a kid, seeing a small active python, he wants to interact with her. So
Yeah.
I've kind of forced myself to interact with her more than a lot of my other snakes because I know he wants to be able to sit down and hold her, and I don't want him getting bit, At least if he doesn't have to be.
I can grab one of those weird little babies and see if it turns out on camera if you want.
Yeah, heck yeah, go for it.
Let me go grab one. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I've been looking at Nick's Cape Yorks, and the pattern on those is really really cool. I'd love to get a trio of the Cape Yorks.
They're pretty cool. I saw he's got some up on Morph Market right now.
Yeah, I'd love to get 1.2 of those because I've got a soft spot for the spotteds. The spotteds are like my favorite Antaresia.
All right. I didn't grab the third one that likes to bite me and latch on to me. I don't know if you'll be able to see these very well or not.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Hold up a little higher.
Yeah.
Oh,
this one right here was the run of the litter. It's kind of a pain in the butt feeder that I've had to like put tails down and now it like now it'll eat pinkies, but I usually have to help it. So there's that one. This one's a little feistier. This one was the wildest looking one out of the bunch right here.
Wow.
In person, it's so much oranger. But just trying to get a view of it there.
Yeah, that's wild.
But yeah,
and the other one is the one that doesn't have
the tails have such reduced pattern on them and stuff. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Look at that.
Yeah, I know it's probably hard to see in here, but yeah, I post them up on Facebook and Instagram. Pretty cool little snakes, man.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, it seems like there's still a lot of potential there as far as morphs. With the Australians have so many morphs going on with their Antaresia. Yeah, that one's a little snappy.
That's little ants, yeah. Yeah, the other one I have is pretty wild looking too, but I know it's kind of even more wild looking, but I know if I take it out, it's just going to latch onto me. So I'll go put these back, but yeah, I'll try to get a good view of them again.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is cool.
This one I honestly thought was a T positive when it came out of the egg, and I'm still not sure that it's totally not. It was so orange when it came out.
Yeah, they're beautiful, like a rusty orange, very reduced pattern. It's almost the same. Yeah, the pattern's like so close to being the same color as the background color. It's wild.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Antaresia are dangerous, especially because you can keep them in smaller enclosures. I mean, I keep mine in 3x2 by 1.5, and that's like so much space for them.
It is, yeah. I mean, they sit in a ball like that usually. So
yeah, so they love it. I mean, being able to cruise around an enclosure that size,
I think I wish they were a little more popular. I think the fact that people probably don't handle them enough and they get bitey on them is why they're not.
Yeah.
But like, honestly, like they're the perfect pet size python, and they've got all the attributes of all the other cool pythons. They're strong feeders, they're active, they're curious, they're intelligent. Like honestly, that's the way most pythons react. Just, like ball pythons are the mainstream. So a lot of people think that most pythons just sit somewhere, in a ball, which is usually not the case with most of them. And Antaresia have all the great attributes of pythons and a pet size or feasible size package, if you will,
Yeah, well, I mean, Dr. Julander calls them the python of the future, right? Or the because they're you can keep them in a relatively small amount of space and still give them so much room. Like they have like a 3x2 by 1.5. It's relatively a very small enclosure, but they have a ton of space in there, and but then you see them too. They're very active, and I think that if you do put the work in with them and you handle them, they really mellow out quite a bit, and getting nabbed by them when they're a baby, it's really it's not going to do anything to your hands, you know?
Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's,
I got bit like 2 or 3 times there. There's not even a mark on my fingers from something that small, you know. That's the good thing too. When they're little, you can get through that real easy because they're not drawing blood on you every time they bite you or causing pain. Um, so for most people, that bite might be initially a scary thing. Like when I'm selling little Antaracia or something at a meet or like a show or something, like a lot of times they'll bite me and I just show the person that that's okay. You know what I mean? That that's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal. It's only a big deal if we make it a big deal, you know? Um, so, and then that gets them a little less nervous about that snake being a little snappy when they see the very non-existent damage that it does, you know? So, they're like, oh, okay, that's not bad. That's not going to hurt me. So I think that can help when you're selling or you know when you're working with Antaracia, just thinking about that. It's small, so don't worry about the bite, you know.
and they're hardy as hell too.
Yes, they are.
They're so hardy. I mean, the where they come from, you know, goes through, you know, quite a bit of variance in temperature.
Yeah.
Spotteds are great for, you know, a little bit of extra humidity too. You know, there's so much potential there. Like you said, I wish that they were more popular as a pet python. I think that they'd be the perfect pet python, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all the Australian stuff for the most part is fairly hardy, you know. It just isn't as popular here for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Antaracia will probably get really popular once the morphs start finally leaking through.
I
Uh,
think, yeah, I think you're right with that. Yeah. Because
yeah.
then
I don't
it's
know
gonna,
when that'll happen, but if it does, I have a feeling things will change with that market a little bit.
yeah.
Everybody will be wanting that stuff.
Yeah. Once it grabs the investor side of the hobby, you know, where people are going to say, oh, you know, there's money to be made here, you know, then they'll go more mainstream for sure.
I'd probably get a message at least once a month of somebody asking me if I have marble children eye or T positive Stimson eye or, you know, T positive spotteds. And I'm like, no, we don't have that here. You get granite or striped. That's what you get.
Yeah,
That's your
yeah.
flavors of the day.
And the stripe is that's not even a morph, right? That's just a genetic.
It's a polygenic trait, from
Okay.
what Justin told me. Yeah, so it's kind of like crested geckos. That's why I think I have ones that are like low expressions. You know what I mean? That like out of the same clutches, I have a really nice stripe that's het granite, but the rest of them all have like little pieces of stripe spotted that I can see in them in places. You know, um, some of them a little less than the other two, but yeah, you can just kind of see the markers here and there. But yeah, it's not like a recessive or a co-dominant or whatever. It's just kind of a polygenic trait that passes on pretty easily.
Yeah. Yeah, I got my two females from Ryan have a very strong stripe down their back, but the male is quite a bit more broken up, which I'm actually happy about because it gives me something different to look at, you know. So I'll be
Uh,
interested to see what kind of striped babies he throws out. I'm thinking
yeah.
about picking up another striped male from Justin. That way I can have 2.2 and have like a really striped male to go with my really striped females and then one with more of a broken up pattern.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, technically, your more striped animals should produce more striped animals, you know, when they're paired together. I would think in that case,
Yeah.
like Harlequin cresteds or something.
So are you still big into crested geckos?
No, I got out of cresteds a while back. Uh, I just had too many snakes, and I don't know. I was kind of like when I had cresteds, I really just got them for a living room pet. I just wanted something to look at in my living room because everything's in a snake room, you know what I mean? And I want to look at reptiles, you know. So that's the one bad thing about being a breeder and like a keeper with a lot of animals sometimes is your collection ends up kind of centralized and you know you've got racks or like manufactured caging and things like that and it's not always like the greatest things for viewing and stuff so that's the one thing I dislike about being a breeder and like being a keeper of so many animals. But I'm working on that, and yeah, I like to be able to look at the animals when I can. So the cresteds, I knew they would start breeding eventually. But then it just kind of got to the point where I was getting a bunch of babies, and I had like some decent looking stuff, like red Dalmatian porthole stuff that was kind of cool looking and stuff. But I couldn't move them very fast either. It's just, there's so much competition out there. So I ended up just, letting the whole group go at like a bulk price to like a crested breeder I knew in the area. And then they resold some of them and bred some of them.
Hmm. Do you keep any of them for feeders?
No, but I thought about it a couple times, especially with keeping all these ants around that can be a little pain to feed here and there. But I thought about doing that. I also thought about it because, and I'll probably never find any here in Ohio. I know somebody that has them, but I don't know if he's producing them yet. I really want to work with Jamaican boas, like really bad. I've always wanted to work with Jamaican boas. They're my favorite boa, and obviously they're CITES protected, so you can't really buy them from out of state. Somebody either has to donate them to you from out of state, or sell them to you, or donate to you within your state.
Mm.
So there's only one person I know in Ohio that even has Jamaican boas right now. There's probably more people than that, but I only know one. So I'm kind of at his mercy right now. But yeah, I think they're really cool snakes, and I'd love to work with them. I don't even want to like sell them in state. I just donate all of them in state to the right people. You know what I mean? Or out of state, because like it's, for me, like, I don't know, I care more about just the animal. I just like the animals, and I want to see them thrive in captivity, and I want to see like us create stuff like this for future generations, so that when like your kids grow up or whatever, they're going to be like, oh man, it was really cool. My dad told me they used to have Jamaican boas back in the day, or Rhode Island Macklots or something, like that stuff needs to still be around for people that enjoy stuff like this to work with and, like appreciate and advocate for.
Yeah, I'm bringing up Jamaican boa now. I'd like to bring up a picture of one because I'm not. Oh wow, those are pretty wild.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
They almost have like
they're,
a scrub python look going
yeah,
on.
yes, they do.
Holy cow.
Which, by the way, that picture you took of that Halmahera yesterday, that thing was fire. I've been like getting turned on by the scrubs a little bit lately, especially tandem bars. I really want to work with tandem bars. I saw one at Tinley, and I was going to buy it the next day, and I even had a deal worked out. And some lady that looked at it earlier in the day came back and bought it with like the last 15 minutes of the show left over. And I was kicking myself the whole next day. I was so mad. It was a patternless xanthic tandem bar, and tandem bars are tough to come by, and it's something I've wanted to work with for a long time. So that's a project on my list as well.
Yeah, I just had Lisa Farina on, and she's working with tandem bars right now.
Is she? I know Bazooka, like Eric Hernandez, I think is his name. He has them. He doesn't let go any of them though. And I'm not going to keep bugging him. I'm not going to try to tick the guy off, but I'd really love to have some, man. I think I'm definitely the right person to work with it. So
yeah, I need to get him on here too to talk about those now that because Lisa kind of alerted me to him keeping the tandem bars, and then if I could have either Holmes or tandem bars, I think I would probably go with the Holmes, just because I love the look. They look incredible.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. I honestly like the gold tandem bars better than the patternless, though. I think the gold ones are really cool looking, especially as juveniles and young. But yeah, I don't own any scrubs currently, and I don't know if I'll ever own like huge scrubs. Yeah, killer Jamaican boa.
Yeah, so if you're just listening right now, there's an image of a Jamaican boa up, and it's honestly, I really, when you said it, I had no idea.
Rographis subflavus or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, holy cow! That has some. I mean, at the tail, it's very black with some spots of pattern, like 3 to 6 scale. Clumped together as like a yellowy brown color, and then as you work your way towards the head, it ends up being almost completely that sort of tan yellow coloration. But holy
Yeah.
cow, that is an incredible looking snake. So those getting those is similar to getting like a Sri Lankan python where they
Yeah, or Eastern Indigo. Yeah, it's all CITES protected. So yeah, there's definitely regulations and rules to it. But yeah,
man.
I really like the West Indian boa stuff. To me, it's like the Indonesian python stuff in a way. It's that same niche kind of. It's like those mid-size boas and pythons, a little more cryptic patterned, a little more different and secretive, and I dig stuff like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it's the I mean, yeah, the rare stuff in the hobby is so attractive, but it's often, for somebody like me that I really do like interacting with my snakes. And I feel like so often, they're kind of rare for a reason,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they don't like being interacted with.
yeah. And whereas me, I'm more of I don't mind messing with anything, but like I like to observe a lot. You know what I mean? I like to look and just admire and things like that. So I'm not a heavy handler, but most of my animals are pretty calm.
Yeah.
So I just put a YouTube video out recently. It was like a quick 2 minute thing about like handling versus interaction. And I think we as people like mistake what's actually positive interaction for like handling, and loving and things like that sometimes. But yeah, I was just kind of explaining, like that positive interaction is way more important than you draping it over your shoulder to make it friendly. You know what I mean? Like just good, gentle handling that, makes the snake feel safe and secure, basically, was what I was getting at. But I think sometimes as people, we just think handle and we look at it as like almost like a mammal pet sometimes, especially people that haven't been keeping for a long time or anything. So I think sometimes we misunderstand our animals.
Yeah, I think you're totally right with that. And I think sometimes um it can be sort of a selfish pursuit to interact with the animal because, and because so like I know that, I was talking with my Patreons. We were talking about stressors and how those are important and everything, and how, sort of like short bouts of stress can have, you know, it can be beneficial, right? Um, like going for a run or something like that, or, watching a
Yeah,
scary movie, things like that. Because we're animals that are accustomed to a certain level of stress, right? So it can almost have a therapeutic effect. But then with your animal, it's like my Timor pythons, like how much of me taking them out and interacting with them, how much of it is beneficial and how much of it is deleterious to the animal, and like you just said, like I'll go into my female Timor's cage, and if I'm going in there and doing maintenance or something, I'll just put the back of my hand up to her and pet her a couple times, and she'll kind of huff and puff and, like try to buck me away and everything. And I'll just kind of be near her just so that way, if I do have to interact with her in the future, maybe it'll be less stressful, and maybe over the weeks and the months and the years, it'll kind of desensitize her to my presence.
it should. I find that they definitely learn us as we learn them, as we grow with them. When I like my olive pythons would be a prime example. They weren't 10 feet when I got them. They were much smaller. I had a learning curve building up to working with them as adults. So as I learned them, they learned me, and like we developed routines together and things like that. So um, I think that's important too. Is just working with that animal. and don't get frustrated when it doesn't go right the first or second time, because that's going to happen, the key is those positive interactions, those gentle interactions that will lead you up to that trusting adult python, especially when you're dealing with some of the rarer things out there, and some of the things that are known to be a little more reactive, edgy, whatever you want to call it. So, but yeah, when you're growing an animal up, even if it's nasty, work with it somehow or another. I'm not saying get in there and get bit, but if you work with it gently enough in certain ways, even a nastier animal will often get to the point where it will allow you to do things with it, like remove it from the enclosure to clean or whatnot. It's a trust building thing. They have to trust you and you have to trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well put. And it's, and I mean, a lot of that is the reason we keep these animals, right? Is because we want to interact with them in some way or another, and sometimes just, viewing them and, watching them, behave in a natural way or what we would perceive to be a natural way is very rewarding as well. But man, I mean, taking out a big friendly snake and interacting with it is very, rewarding.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. and kids love stuff like that when they see it, and that's important too. I don't actually have kids, but kids are the future of what we do here. So getting as many kids loving reptiles as possible is good for our future as keepers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how many of us are in this hobby because of an interaction that we had when we were a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, yesterday, I'll bring up a picture of that Halmahera scrub too, just real quick. I mean,
that thing's cool, man.
I mean, and they were very laid back too. He said that Stephen Tillis said that he was, this kind of first generation of captive bred ones that he produced are very, very laid back, a lot less shy than the parents were. Cool. But yeah, geez, that was like the highlight of the whole trip. I mean, we got to see
beautiful too. I also work with white lip pythons as well.
Oh, do you? Northerns or
Northerns?
Southerns?
They're probably a year or two off from breeding still. They're about 4 feet right now. Still a little slender. But yeah, they were kind of rough in the beginning. They're getting there. Back to the taking time with stuff, they're starting to get to the point where I wouldn't call them something I want to just put in my hands and handle a bunch or anything like that, but they're getting to the point where at least they'll let me tail them and stuff like that without freaking out now and things like that. So, and mine are F1s. So,
oh, wow. Yeah. It's,
cool snakes though.
They are. They are. They're so cool. We got to see those. We got to see Bismarck ring pythons as well, which I mean, out in the sun, they're incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man, there's so many cool snakes out there. It's
Indonesia and Australia for me, like just because I'm a python nut. I mean, and just that whole like Malaysia area down, it's just like pretty much all the world's pythons are right there. Save a handful of them, It's really neat to think about.
Do you keep any of the larger animals like retics or berms?
No, olives are actually the largest species that I keep. I thought about maybe getting into like some low-cal, like super dwarf retic stuff. I really like the Calatoa stuff a lot. I think it's kind of cool looking. But those are expensive and I'm not quite there yet. So I've got other things I want to get to before that. So
yeah. What's on your list to get to before that?
Well, the tandem bars were high on the list. Obviously, the Jamaican boas we talked about, diamond pythons. Let's see here. What do I have that I want to work with still? I've thought about working with Angolans. I go on the fence with Angolans all the time. I've never had them, but I'm kind of back and forth on them. I've been digging some of the coastal stuff a lot lately. I'd really like to have some inland carpets as well.
Yeah.
Pygmy pythons are on my list. That's the only Antaracia I don't currently keep. Dunn's pythons, those are the only Liasis that I don't keep currently. I'm not too big into Apodora. I like Apodora, but I like Aussie olives a little better than Apodora. So I don't know. For me to get Apodora, it's kind of like, I don't know, almost having the same thing, only something I don't like as much.
Mm.
Uh, let's see. What else do I want to get into? There's so much.
Do you keep any short tails?
I do, actually. I'm actually thinking about letting go of them. I keep the Malaysians. I've bred them once, and they're both my females are gravid right now. It's mostly T positive albino stuff. I've got a pair of adult T positives and a female matrix that's het T positive, and they produce some pretty cool looking stuff for me, actually. But I like the short tails. They just don't totally fit in with what I'm doing now. And I guess if I had a knock on them, it would be the urine.
Yeah, that seems like the general consensus, the downside, if you will.
And it's not even in the enclosure for me. The snake can pee all over the enclosure. That's whatever, you know. It's when I take them to expos, man. And the babies are just so touchy sometimes too. They're like flipping like fish out of water, and you put them in your displays, and you go and you open it up, and it's like a freaking flood in there. You know what I mean? It's like, come on. But like short tails are like beautiful, beautiful animals to look at, though. Like I always say that I really love looking at my bloods. I just don't always love dealing with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I just started dipping my toe in the short tail world, and I've got two bloods that are martyr line. And so kind of like I said, kind of refining that sort of wild type to get this, you know, extreme version of what you'd see. And God dang, I love them so much. I mean, every time I take them out.
Great in them and stuff, though. I mean, it's just phenomenal. Really nice animals. Unfortunately for them, that's what made them part of the skin trade for many years, was their look.
Yeah, and I believe that they're still in the skin trade.
I'm sure they probably are. I would imagine bloods and retics are still probably pretty heavily into the skin trade.
Yeah. We saw a Bali retic yesterday, and I guess so. Steven said that the male is generally the one that he shows off, but he was in shed and like very opaque. So he brought out the female, and we had this, he has like this biosecure facility that is totally cut off from everything with an air scrubber, and he disinfects his arms and everything before he goes in there. And so we have this piece of glass between us and this Bali retic female. My son is like staring at her, and she bites at the glass, like right at his face. And and then she turned on Steven, and Steven's trying to wrangle this large snake. She must have been, I don't know, 10, 12 feet, I would say.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty intense experience.
I bet.
It was intense. But then, you know, he had Burmese pythons, and they're like puppy dogs, you know, just totally laid back. And I'm like, man, you know, being in Florida too, that was cool for me, you know, because there's so many animals that I can't interact with like that, being where I am. But that's
absolutely,
that's why the Holmes are so cool, you know, something that a scrub that I could keep, you know, the Tannenbars I could keep as well. But yeah, it'd be cool to see those kind of take off more in the hobby, see more people working with them and breeding them.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I'm trying so hard to get some Tannenbars and stuff like that, because I think for most people, like feasibly, a lot of the scrubs are just not great for most people. You know, I mean, no offense to anybody out there that wants to buy scrubs, but you know, sometimes people get animals and they think they know what they're getting into, and they a lot of times don't. So I think when you're dealing with something that's got a little less size to it, there's a little bit less of a sharp learning curve, and it's a little more feasible for your average human being. You know what I mean? There might be somebody that's just like the best scrub keeper you've ever met, and they're just great with them, and they're like the scrub whisperer, and but that's one out of how many people, you know what I mean? So something like a Tannenbar or the Homahara, that keeps a little smaller size, I think that's more feasible for people. And then I think over time you'll end up, if enough people are producing them, you'll end up with less reactive animals in captivity, just like we have with everything else. Let's go back to short-tailed pythons. Prime example, short-tailed pythons, 80s and 90s, not a great reputation. Much better reputation nowadays. Everybody used to joke that they were called blood pythons because of what they did to you, So, but yeah, they're not quite that reputation nowadays. We know, you got to handle them right, and you got to, you got to ignore the huffy puffy stuff, and just take it slow with them. They're ground snakes. Don't sling them over your shoulder. They're not like a carpet and a boreal. They like to be supported. They're ground snakes. So, but yeah, that would be cool to see people doing that. The Tannenbars are like a big passion project of mine that I'm not even into yet. I'm already like obsessed with it, and I don't even have any. So
that's perfect.
That's me. And then we're actually looking to branch out a little bit. I've been placing some ads up. I'd like to get into some Australian dwarf monitors, actually. I've kept monitors over the years, and most of the time it was because I thought they were cool lizards, and also because they make nice garbage disposals for my snakes when they don't eat something. But I'd like to get into some smaller species, like the more insectivorous stuff, like Pilbar rocks and Kimberley rocks and yellow and red ackies. And so I'm looking to branch out into some lizards in the future as well. Not sure how far I'll go with that, but we'll see. It seems pretty cool right now, and it's stuff that I like a lot. Monitors are probably, being mostly a snake keeper, monitors are by far my favorite, genus of lizards. I do keep some Mexican beaded lizards as well, actually.
Do you really?
I've had them for less than a year now. Yeah. They're still
How do you like them?
Oh, they're pretty cool. They're huffy, puffy. It's kind of like keeping a blood python. They like jerk around, huff, puff, and hiss. But the female's a little crankier here and there, but the male, he's pretty good, actually. I just put some gloves on, pick him up. He's cool.
What would happen if you got bit by one of them?
Okay, so like Gila venom, Mexican beaded venom, it's not something you want to get bit by. You should definitely not play games with them. It's no joke. You're gonna end up in a hospital if you get bit by them. Are you gonna die? More than likely not, unless you have some severe outlying health issue or something like that. But you're probably going to wish you were dead for a couple of days. You're going to have nausea, cramping, throwing up. You're going to have like muscle seizing, spasming, things like that. And it's going to be intense. I've never been bitten by something like that. And I hope I never get bitten by something like that. I don't really mess with much venomous stuff. I'm not a guy that's like, and I love looking at cobras. You know what I mean? Like I could sit in a room full of cobras and stare at them for like 48 hours straight, probably. But I don't keep cobras because it's dangerous. You know what I mean? I want to keep my digits and all that. So, but I love how they look. So, but I don't mess with, really hots really. But, I had a friend had some beadeds that he had bred, and, he's a great breeder. I've got some other stuff from him, ATBs, rosy boas, tomato frogs. He's just a really good breeder of stuff. And so I decided to take some on, and they're actually pretty cool. They're not hard to deal with. You just use caution, wear gloves, keep an eye on them, like when they get bigger, you're not going to want to let them get around on you or anything if they're angry, but, you just use caution, use safety protocols, like even pythons. I'm a big hook user. You know what I mean? I used to get people ragging on me when I was younger about using hooks. They're like, oh, you pussy, you're using hooks. Like, I don't want to freaking bleed out, and I don't want my snake teeth coming out of its mouth, and it doesn't want its teeth coming out of its mouth, or a mouth infection or mouth rot, or, like that's just stupid thought, man. That's just stupid, like toxic masculinity stuff or something. I don't know, but Like you're not a man if your snake bites you. I hate to tell you that doesn't give you an ever ranging man card. That means that you couldn't get out of the way in time. But uh, and that's part of it. I know bites are like a thing that like people are scared to talk about nowadays. Like Brian Barczyk basically got crucified over his bite videos back in the day and stuff. And I get why it was so controversial, but bites are part of what we do, keeping reptiles. If anybody, regardless of anybody wants it to be or not, I definitely don't want it to be. I wish they were all smiley and said hello to me when I woke up in the morning, but that's just not how it works. And I think it's important to understand bites and protocols, and especially if you're keeping anything hot, it's definitely important to understand that. So I'm glad you asked that question about the beadeds.
Yeah. So what, like, is there you mentioned gloves. Is there are you using a special kind of glove, or is it just are you just putting on like leather gardening gloves?
Right now they're smaller, so I kind of go with like the leather gardening. As they get bigger, it'll be more like a welding type, foundry type glove, where they can't get teeth through it to get venom through it, or something like that,
Do they try to latch onto the glove when you handle them?
No, not yet at all. I've
Okay.
seen videos of other people's that have, or they'll, kind of rear back and, take a shot, but mine haven't done that yet.
What is your protocol? Like, let's say, well, actually I have I have a couple questions. So what's your protocol? Like if you went into your olive enclosure and a bite and wraps you?
Yeah. Well, for that, mainly I keep a bottle of scotch that I don't drink on top of my enclosure. And a lot of times if I'm going in and I'm here by myself, I'll have it open just in case. Because usually like a drop or two of alcohol, if you can get it into a snake's mouth, like it burns the gum, So to them, they're like, oh, this isn't edible, and usually they'll let go of it. It doesn't work every single time, but it usually does. So that's what I usually do. Or, like Kit will be here and, if I'm getting ready to feed or something, a lot of times I'll be like, hey, just listen for me. I'm about to feed these olives and, she just laid eggs or whatever, and she's on a tear. So I need to watch my ass down here. But yeah, usually I'll have Kit around to like holler for her, or she'll be down here with me working on something. Or, and I also keep that whiskey handy, and, and then there's always the last resort. You can chew on their tail if they really get a hold of you and you can get to their tail, probably going to catch a mouthful of musk doing that too.
Oh. Yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind too. I mean, the olives get a little bit larger, for sure.
Yeah, I had a big olive, like just musk, like right down me one day.
Oh,
when she was out, like flipping around. She was probably 7-8 feet at the time, and just her tail just came down and just musk straight down the front of the face. So I was like, that is the worst thing that's ever happened to me keeping snakes. Never been bit in the face, but I've been musked in the face.
I think I'd take getting bit in the face over getting musked in the face. So, are there any restrictions where you're at in Ohio with the beaded lizards, or
as far as I'm aware, no. There are venomous restrictions here, but beadeds and Gilas were not included in the bill when it took place. And also like rear fang stuff obviously was not included. But yeah, any elapids, vipers, any amethystine, rock python, Burmese, reticulated anaconda over 12 feet, any gators outside of dwarf caimans, that's all banned.
Really?
Yep.
So you can keep snakes.
You can have berms and all that stuff, but you're not supposed to have any over 12 feet.
Huh. And there's a guy that goes around and measures everybody's snakes.
If there is, no one's met him.
So all of your olive pythons are 11 feet, I'm assuming.
Yeah. They're about 10 and a half, 11 and a half feet. It just depends on the day.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I mean, they are right around 11, 11 and a half, I would say. I'm not great at judging at a look, and I don't really pull them out and measure them or anything, but,
Yeah.
they're right around there. They say olives, usually their max is around 13. Some have gotten bigger, but those are exceptions.
Yeah, yeah. There's the they have the what's the name of the other olive that's in
The Pil-
Australia?
is it the
Pilbara?
Pilbara? Pilbara
Yeah.
olive?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I've seen pictures of them eating like
Like
crocodiles
wallabies.
and these giant animals, and it's like, holy shit, that is one big python.
Yeah. The Owen Pelly is a big python too, like lengthwise.
Yeah, they're one of my favorite snakes. I love looking at pictures of them. They're so cool.
It's I need to go to Australia someday, probably. I'm sure it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I want to go. That's on my list for sure to go over there. I mean, there's just so many cool snakes over there. I mean,
Yeah.
black-headed pythons, womas, all the Antaresia, all the Morelia. I mean,
You know what I want to know though? Where's all their colubrids? Like we have their pythons for the most part represented in our collections, and monitors and water dragons and bearded dragons and frilled dragons and all these other reptiles. You don't see many Australian colubrids out there.
what do they have?
I don't know.
The vine is
That's
it the
why I
vine
don't say
snake?
it. I mean, I'm sure they've got stuff. They've got to have like certain types of cat-eyed snakes and stuff like that. I would imagine. I don't know, but there's got to be some colubrids over there. You'd think.
Yeah.
But like when the smuggling went down back in '81 real hard or whatever before it passed, did nobody think to just grab some colubrids up or what?
Yeah, that is kind of interesting that you don't, because I think it's the what is it, the common vine snake in WA, but from what I hear they're pretty rare.
I mean, maybe that's the majority of what's there. Lapids and pythons. I don't know, but you
Yeah,
think some kind of in between. Most ecosystems have that.
yeah, I wonder if they're like if they're like rear fang venomous, or yeah, it'd be interesting to look into that. Yeah, they've got so many cool animals over in Australia. It's got to be, and that, but that, like, it's such a huge expanse of land that,
Yeah.
like, you'd have to do like 3 or 4 trips,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
so
Indo's
like,
cool too. I like Indonesia a lot. There's so much cool stuff there too.
yeah, I'd love to see retics in the wild. I'd love to see berms in the wild. I mean, I'm in Florida, so I can just go down to the
Yeah,
Everglades.
technically you can kind of see berms in the wild, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
next month we're going to see some. Hopefully we'll come across some. Hopefully we'll get lucky.
yeah.
But yeah, the Florida python.
Is it as bad as they say down there?
I don't know
Or is
yet.
it exaggerated?
I've never seen any. So I'll be curious to see what we can find when we go looking. It'll be in mid-April, so it's supposed to be pretty lively that time of year.
Yeah.
So we'll see what we come up with.
Huh.
I'll keep you
Interesting.
posted. Yeah.
Cool.
Hopefully I'll find a giant. That'll be cool. I
That
don't.
would be.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll find it before it finds you.
I mean,
Here's one. I stepped on it. It's attached to me.
yeah. Now it's part of my thigh. So what other kinds of Morelia do you keep, or is it just the jungles right now?
I work with Morelia bredeli as well.
Oh yeah,
Morelia
that's right.
bredeli I've actually bred longer than anything else I've bred here. Actually, that's everything that I keep. I've bred those longer than everything. I started off with a pair of striped animals that I got from the Hampers a long time ago. They're probably pushing 17, 18 years old right now, I think.
Wow.
And I think she's gravid this year. I just paired her to hypo 66% het stripe from Nick Mutton's line that I bought from him a while back. Finally got him up to size to where he's ready to breed. I've been pairing him to my big stripe girl and my big normal girl. So hopefully I'll get some Reptile later in the year too. Those are more of a later clutch. They're a little different than the other Aussie stuff because of their cooling. They go at a different time. But that's the only Morelia that I currently keep are Bredli and jungles. So
what size enclosure are you keeping those girls in?
Oh, those are in like 4x2x3s.
Okay, a little bit more height.
Yeah. And then I'm going to move them eventually to like 4x3x6 is what I'm going to do.
Oh, damn. Oh, that'll be awesome.
Because like I said, I want to get to where I'm looking at stuff more again. You know what I mean? And I'm not just, it's easy, because you need money. So you're saving money and you're like, well, I'll buy this minimum size enclosure or this minimum size enclosure, but that's not always what's the best thing for the animal necessarily. Now with little stuff, minimum is great.
Yeah.
But you get a big adult and room to roam's good,
So
I'm a big adult. I don't want to stay locked in my bathroom all day.
Yeah. So how are you had mentioned before balancing that kind of keeper and breeder mentality. How are you doing that going forward? And do you see it changing the way that you keep? Do you want to find a more perfect balance where you're appreciating the animals more and being able to observe them more, but also be able to breed and reproduce?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely want to keep the needs of the animal to what the animal needs, and I want to keep it to what I need as a breeder, but, I want to find the right balance, you know what I mean? Which I will, and I'm working on that. A lot of it's going to be my own DIY caging, you know what I mean? I have like a whole wall that goes way back here, and that's just going to go DIY caging that I'm going to build all myself, I think. And that way I can design the enclosure the way I want it in the space I want it. I'm not just stuck with what's available at the local reptile expo or whatever, so that'll help a lot. But I think it'll make me more appreciative as a keeper and breeder too, being able to just walk down and see these big open areas with my animals sitting in them, and I already love my animals to death. So seeing them every day is, I check on everything, but like in your typical snake keeper setup, it's hard to like appreciate them always in like a natural type setting or something like that. And I'd like to go that way a little bit more with some of my bigger animals. Don't get me wrong. I mean, sometimes the best thing in the world is a freaking drawer and some paper and a water dish and some heat tape and a hide, like sometimes that's the best thing in the world, depending on what you're working with. But, like for your carpets, your McLots, your stuff that likes to climb around and move a lot, I'd like to be able to see those on display and exhibiting their natural behaviors a little bit more than I do now.
So how are you building your DIY cages? Like, what's your go-to materials? Are you using OSB or sheets of plywood?
Still on the fence about that. It's probably going to depend on what I can find locally. I've built a lot of plywood caging and stuff, and if you line it right and stuff, it works great, but it's so damn heavy. Like you have to have casters on it. And then even at that, God forbid you move or something, you know what I mean? Like this olive cage, I have to pop it apart to get it out of this room, So, I'm hoping that I can go with some kind of like a PVC board, because, that also helps your humidity a little bit. Not that wood's completely terrible, but PVC is a little bit better. And not that Aussie stuff needs high humidity all the time, but stuff like McLots enjoys it. Anything from those islands where they get a lot of rainfall, they're going to enjoy some humidity. And also plastic just holds up better against the pee, the poop, the water, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I've thought about building some cages and kind of using wood, but then it's like, how do you seal it and how do you make sure that it's not toxic once it's cured, and then you have to wait for that cure time. And then are you doing that inside the house where you've got these, these VOCs going off into the air, which is really not good. And then how do you tackle doing that outside so you don't have the chemicals inside and then getting this giant heavy wooden enclosure inside, Yeah. Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah, reptile caging is definitely one of your biggest challenges as a keeper or breeder or whatever it's going to be. I mean, especially once you start getting a few like adult animals, it's not like you can just have a 4-foot enclosure somewhere with your one animal in it. At that point, you gotta make sure you got the right size enclosures for everything. So
yeah. What do you keep in racks and tubs that you want to get into enclosures?
I'd like to see some of my Anteracia in more enclosures, since they're ones that'll utilize it. Stuff like Wolmas and stuff like that, they're kind of like ground snakes. So, I could put them in something natural, but they're just going to lay there mostly anyway. Stuff like water pythons and stuff that I like to keep in racks that's a little more crazy reactive because it's nicer on the animal. It's not smacking its face on the glass all day long when you walk by. But definitely like Maclots, carpets. I'd like to even like church up my olive cage and make it a little more decorative instead of basic, some shelving and things for them to sit on. Trying to look around my room and see what else. Mainly that's it though. Mostly like my carpets, Macs, and olives. I'd like to really upgrade the enclosures on. When my white lips get grown, we'll see how they do. I'd like to keep them in like open caging where they can look nice, but I know they're like glass smackers, so hopefully they'll be a little better once they get to that size. I'd really like to have like white lip caging with like nice branches in it and stuff where you can see them out and they're under like some nice UV or something. That's another thing too, that, I don't really keep much lighting on most of my stuff. It's mostly heat tape, and I wouldn't mind like seeing some lighting on my stuff too. That gives you your iridescence and, it just gives you a better view of your animal overall.
Yeah, better view. And I feel like you get to see more behavior out of them, right? Because then they utilize the lighting, they're going to seek it out.
Reptiles gravitate towards the light because that's usually where the heat source is, so yeah, I think it'd definitely be helpful. We're getting there on some stuff, and we're expanding, but so, but yeah, that's probably one of my next big projects here is to start building my caging.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That would be even, great for the social media aspect, right? Just building cages. Like people love seeing that kind of stuff. That's great content.
Yeah.
Especially on like your YouTube channel and everything, like showing how you're doing it. And because I think that I feel like there's more of a push to go in that direction now with the hobby is, giving more to the animals, more space, more, everything. And
there is.
Yeah.
I think some people go a little too far with it times too, like anything, it can go one way or another. But I mean, like I sometimes I get people that buy like hatchling Eastern Stimsons from me and they're like, this is going to be fine in my 4x2x2, right? And I'm like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That thing's not going to do good even in a 10-gallon, maybe, you know what I mean? Like you might need something smaller than that. But yeah, you got to talk to those people and explain it. Sometimes they go kicking and screaming, but usually they take your advice.
Yeah. I've lost children's pythons because I had them in too big of an enclosure, and like kind of the bigger the enclosure, the bigger the gaps are in the enclosure, and then that's their way of exiting the enclosure.
I bet like once every week or two, I see somebody in an Anteracia group posting about they lost their children's python and how can they find it.
Yeah,
it's pretty common. I have a vision rack here, and if you have a vision rack, listen up because this is important. When I first started breeding my children's pythons, I had this vision rack and I was putting babies in it. And I figured out the air holes are wide enough that they can put their heads through them. And I actually had a snake get stuck in it and it got out, thank God, and was fine. But that was the last time I ever used a vision rack for anything Anteracia size or smaller.
Yeah, because they have that perforated
have
shelf.
a head like that, or it can fit through it pretty much.
Dang.
Now I keep them in like an ARS, where ARS kind of tunnels out their air holes, you know, like they're wider at the top than the center, so nothing can fit through the center. But yeah, if you keep a vision rack or something like that, especially an older one, design flaw. Just
man. Yeah. Do you use substrate or paper?
I often use aspen, but I'll use paper with stuff. A lot of times I use paper with bigger stuff because it's an easier cleanup. But it just depends on the time of year sometimes, or, you know, what's available. I was getting pretty good deals on aspen at TSC for a while, Tractor Supply Company, but it seems like that supply might have dried up a little bit. So it was like the big bags that you see on like the shows for like $20 some, $7.50 a bag.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's nuts. But they stopped carrying them?
Some of them still have them and some of them around here don't. Aussie stuff I tend to lean pretty heavily with aspen actually. It's, you know, it's a drier climate there and aspen's kind of dry in ways. So it tends to work pretty well to keep you right at that 45 to 50% humidity you need for a lot of the Aussie species. If it's like bloods or savu, or, you know, even like I even keep a few old normal ball pythons that I've had for years upon years. My youngest ball python's 25 years old right now. Wow. I'll keep them on something like cypress mulch, or sometimes paper works good because I can mist the paper and it brings the humidity up, things like that. Yeah, I've got 2 adult female ball pythons that I got back in my pet store days I was talking about in like 1997. And they were like breedable adults when I got them, not small breedable adults either. So that's 28 years. I'm guessing they were at least 5 or 6 when I got them.
Wow. So they're over 30 years old.
34 years old, easy.
Jeez.
One girl is massive.
Really? How big?
Yeah. I bet she's 5 feet, but I mean, she's girthy. You at a glance, you'd be like, is that a blood python almost? She's not quite that girthy, but you know, she's, I think she's, you know, all those were like wild caughts back in the day, you know, like I got those 2 big girls I got for free in the pet stores I was working in. That was before the morph craze, before, you know, the only thing out back then was like albinos and pieds, and they were so expensive nobody could afford them anyway at that point. But yeah, the pet stores, they didn't want them back then. They even called them like junk snakes back then, I think.
Wow.
You know, and stuff like that. Like Kevin at Nerd had a thing. It was like his slogan was like "No junk snakes" when he started breeding ball pythons. You know. The pet store I worked at, they hated getting adults in. I'd be like, I'll take them. I'll freaking breed normals and I'll sell them at shows or whatever, it doesn't bother me any. Nobody else is doing it. That's me. If nobody else is doing it, I'm like, oh yeah, sign me up.
That's kind of cool to actually breed. It'd be really neat to see people actually work with normal ball pythons.
Yeah.
And just do like line breeding and make, like really nice looking normal ball pythons.
You never know, man. Like 10 years from now, those could be what's the most expensive ball python out there.
Yeah.
Because they might not exist anywhere anymore.
A locality ball python.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a couple guys that like around this area that have talked about doing it and stuff. It's definitely a feasible option, I would think, Yeah. I think like some of the morphs sell for as low as the normals now anyway, so. Or you go into the pet store somewhere and they're calling them fancy ball pythons.
Yeah.
I was telling my friend, I was like, when they start labeling them like guppies, that's not a good thing, man.
Do you still breed those ball pythons?
No, they're retired. Those are just my pets now. They'll just live their days out here with me until they're gone, or I am, whatever happens first.
Yeah, yeah.
So they might outlive me. The 25-year-old male I have, I actually hatched in 2000.
Really?
So he's not quite 25, but he's pushing it. But yeah, he's just a normal that I hatched way back in the day. Yeah.
Wow. That's so cool. And is he the offspring from the female you have, the really old one?
No, his mother has passed and his father at this point, actually. Yeah, these are just two different females.
Yeah, okay.
My ball pythons are cranky too.
Are
It's
they
probably
well, they're wild
I
caught,
don't
right?
mess with them either, yeah. But yeah, they tend to get a little cranky on me here and there. The male, he'll bite you. He doesn't care. But yeah, I mean, I think it's cool to, like my girlfriend always gets on me because I'm always complaining about too many ball pythons and stuff. And she's like, don't offend people. And I'm not trying to offend anybody. It's not the snake's fault. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that there's so many of them out there because there's so many people that think this is like a quick money maker or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I've never really made money selling snakes in my entire life. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, sometimes I'll make enough at shows and stuff to cover my food bills for the month, or maybe help me out a little bit. But like breeding rare pythons, it's not like it's selling like McDonald's cheeseburgers or anything. It's a weird thing, and but yeah, I just think that there's too many people out there that think this is going to be like some kind of quick Ponzi scheme for them. And then we get people in there for the wrong reasons. And then we all look bad. And then we all look like a bunch of money grubbing jerks, and it's not good, just work with what you like. I mean, even if that's not making you money, find another way to make money. If that's what you got to do, just do what you like and do what you love and you'll be happy with it. And everybody out there that's breeding a million different base morphs of ball pythons is not in love with what they're doing. Some of them are, and that's awesome. You know what I mean? And like I went to Tinley and I saw like ball pythons that were freaking amazing, but I don't know. I just think that we got to make sure we're in it for the right reasons and taking care of the animals the best we can and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, how much you've been in the hobby for quite a while. I mean, getting ball pythons back in the 90s and everything. How much has the hobby must feel totally different than from what it was in the 90s, right?
For sure.
A quarter century ago.
Although right now it almost is starting to feel like it's going back that way a little bit in ways. In the late 90s, well, the reason I work with a lot of the stuff that I do in ways, not just the only reason, but in the 90s, like late 90s, when you'd read Reptiles magazine or, like you'd see anything at like shows, everybody was doing different stuff. You know what I mean? Like the biggest morph craze at that time was Burmese pythons, basically. You had the green berm, the labyrinth, and all that stuff going on, and corn snakes and colubrids and stuff. But the other pythons, there wasn't a lot of morphs in and stuff, and everybody just was like, back then, I think what it was is you just kind of wanted to breed all kinds of different stuff. And that kind of measured you as like a keeper, a breeder, or whatever you want to call it, but I think once that morph craze hit, and then like the retic morph craze hit after that, and then the crested geckos, I think basically just, and I can't always blame people for making money either, because I get it. This is a country where we got to make money and you got to put food on your table. But I think everybody just kind of went the route towards the easier money, and I was right there too, like I was breeding several ball pythons at that time. I think at one time I had like 30 adult ball pythons here or something like that, which is nothing compared to some of these guys. But for me, that's a lot of one species, but I think that it just kind of wiped everything out. And then what you saw was everybody stopped working with jungle carpets, except for people like Nick and Ryan and whoever else, what I mean? And everybody stopped working with children's pythons and white lip pythons and Macklot's pythons. Macklot's pythons were everywhere in the 90s. They were $50. You could buy one for $50. I saw wild caught imported Bismarck ring pythons for $50 on the table one time. And just to think about that today is like astronomical. Scrub pythons, you couldn't give them away. I was like 20 years old. I bought an African rock python for $15 and flipped it for 25 at the next show or something like that, And I'm not a big flipping guy nowadays. I could kind of see the issues with stuff, but yeah, I mean, like stuff was cheap back then. And a lot of it just nobody really cared about that much even then. But there was a lot more stuff back then, more monitors, more kinds of lizards. You see a lot of frilled dragons, water dragons, all kinds of different stuff, and different snakes, obviously, different kinds. And now everything's just, you go to show and it's ball pythons, crested geckos, gargoyle geckos, BCIs, and probably some retics and hognoses somewhere. You know what I mean? And that's the majority of what you're probably looking at, outside of maybe some axolotls, frogs, and tarantulas.
Yeah, you nailed it.
In the 90s, this guy might have bred jungle carpets. And then you go next door and this guy breeds Argentine boas. And then you go next door and this guy breeds ball pythons. And he also breeds corn snakes. And then the next guy has monitors or beer. You know what I mean? There was just a little bit more variety back then, I think, than there is now. And I see people nowadays talking about there is variety out there. And I think there is if you go to the right shows and stuff. But I don't think these people have been coming to my neck of the woods or other people's neck of the woods as much and seeing what's really out there, because most of the expos, and I mean, you can even look on Morph Market and see it. It's predominantly ball pythons, crested geckos, and whatever else is super popular. And we need that mainstream popular stuff to bring people into our hobby and maybe they get into ball pythons and they're like, you know what, this is a little slow and boring for me. Maybe I'll try jungle carpet python, you know what I mean? Or something like that. And we need that for that. But I think there's definitely been a lot of people out there profiting from the downfall of the animals to an extent a little bit too,
You think that we're kind of steering more towards more specialized breeders, more people that are really devoted to a specific species?
It seems like it's headed that way a little bit. I think that a lot of us are we're kind of tired of all the BS and all the problems, and we're tired of getting looked at as jerks, basically. We're tired of being made to look bad by everybody. So I think that a lot of us responsible keepers, I think that, we're doing the best we can to put ourselves in a good light and put this community in a good light. And that's what we need with all this legislation that's always trying to be passed everywhere and stuff. We need to give people, just like I mentioned earlier, you need to give your snake that positive interaction. Well, when you're working with your snakes or your reptiles, you need to give people that aren't familiar with them a positive interaction with them. Whether that be touch or sight or whatever, don't take your 18-foot berm down to freaking Kroger on a Monday morning when there's 90-year-old ladies in there shopping with it draped around your neck and expect to get a positive reaction. You know what I mean? Like we gotta be realists as well, especially if it's one that's not friendly or something, but it's not like a dog or cat. I mean, people are even reserved about dogs and cats in public places. But, when we're taking this and that everywhere, we got to realize that everybody has different comfort levels, and these people aren't me or they're not you and I'm not them. So we just have to, I think being respectful to each other is the first part. And, a little understanding goes a long way from both sides.
Absolutely. And how do you feel the introduction of social media has changed the hobby?
In ways it's good, and in other ways it's bad. Social media is great for like keepers and breeders to be able to promote themselves, obviously. And it's great for information, but it's also terrible for information because it depends on who's giving you the information and what they know and what they think they know. So,
yeah.
But overall, I mean, if I'm looking for info or something on something harder, I can look up what I see on the web, and usually I can find something that will help me, and if I can piece that together, I'm like a big, when you're dealing with this rare stuff, sometimes you got to piece your knowledge together. So I check this book, and this book, and then go online and check this article and that article and this article. And then maybe I pull out a stack of Reptiles magazines and look for, you know what I mean? So I like the cross reference, get all the info. But the internet is great because of YouTube and things like that. My partner Kit has not been keeping snakes as long as me. She's only been keeping for like 5 years. I've been keeping since the mid 90s. So, pretty steadily. So I think some of the YouTube stuff was definitely helpful for her to see like certain videos, and be able to, and she's also from a different era that she's a little younger than I am. So she's from a different era than I am, where like it was more of an internet age for her than me growing up. So she relates to, like the YouTube things and a lot better. Whereas me, I grew up and we just had to study everything out of books pretty much. So that's why I'm such like a book guy when it comes to keeping my animals.
What are your top 3 snake books?
Top 3 snake books. Oh man, for me, I gotta say number 1 is the Complete Children's Python. I really feel that's like one of the best books on snakes that I've ever written or ever read. Period. Volume Pythons of the World, Volume 1. David and Tracy Barker, the Australian, is probably up there real high for me. That also has the best book account I can find on all of pythons anywhere. The new Complete Carpet Python book is a pretty good one too. I'm trying to think what other books I have that I really like. Those would probably be my top 3, I would say. I also have some older books that are a little dated now. But man, in the late 90s, I like really grew up on these. It's called Pythons of the World and Boas of the World, I think, or something like that. Or no, it's The Living Pythons and the Living Boas by Walls.
Okay.
It wasn't a great in-depth account, but it's species accounts, all the way through. So there was at least enough information to read there on each species. Stuff like that's what made me want to keep variety too. You look through that book and it's like got every single python there. And oh man, that's cool too, and that's cool.
Yeah, I just ordered. What's the name of the book? So Many Snakes, So Little Time.
Okay.
I think I've just heard so many people talk about that book and say that it's such a fantastic book that it got to the point where I was just like, ordered. I got it off Amazon. It's like, it's like $30 and change on Amazon, and it's going to be here tomorrow. So there's some books where they come up so many times in conversation that you hear so many people are reading it that you're like, all right, I'm going to give in and get this one. I know I have the one by the Barkers. I've got the more complete carpet python, and I definitely need to get the children's python one because I do love Antaresia so much. As time goes on, I love them more and more.
Yeah. The more I keep them, the more I like them. I just got like some wheat belts like a year or so ago, and I'm totally in love with those things. Like they're just amazing.
What do you like about them?
The coloration, like to me, they look a little different than almost all the other Antaraceae in ways, just because of like their dark burgundy tones and their brown and just that light chestnut cream. It seems lighter than the other Antaraceae to me with that yellow in there. But yeah, just the look of them, the contrast, the adults look insane with that. Once they get their, the way their neck is, they got that dark, like contrasty band on their neck. It's just fantastic. Wheat belts are awesome. And I love Easterns a lot. I love the little pugnacious attitudes of Easterns. They're always on their heels, ready to fight me until I pick them up. But But yeah,
it's
that's a great book. I really enjoy that one a lot, and it's an easy read too. It's only 4 species basically, so it's not like the carpet book where it's a heavy digestion.
yeah. And my problem with the carpet book is I keep going back and like reading the same parts about the animals I'm most interested in. So
Uh-huh.
I'm, and I need to just sit down and start pushing through it instead of going back and being like, let me read about diamonds again. Let me read about, jungles again. And then you get distracted by some picture and you end up on the internet, cause it's like, let me look this person up and,
How to end up at Baskin Robbins.
yeah, man. All right. Well, it was great talking to you, man. Is there anything else, any other species you want to cover, or do you think we just
Uh,
about covered it all?
I think I covered most of what we keep. I mean, we do keep a few colubrids, mostly common stuff. That's like table candy, Mexican black kings, and Hondurans, and variable kings, and so a couple other things. But yeah, we plan on expanding a little bit more on our Aussie endo pythons for sure.
And the
Expanding
monitors, right?
monitors, yeah, and maybe some West Indian boas as well. So that's
Yeah,
pretty
that
much what we're into and what we plan on doing here. We just did Tinley Park for the first time, and that is a fantastic reptile show. If y'all have never been there, I've never been there in my life until then, and I would highly recommend going just because the variety is good and it's just a great big show and all kinds of fun stuff to do. So we'll be back there in October though. We're already signed up. Um,
nice. Do you ever come down to Florida for Daytona?
I have not, but I've known about Daytona for a while, obviously, since I've been around, and I would like to make that journey one day.
Yeah, hell
Um,
yeah. I've
so
gone
you
before.
go to that show?
Yeah, I've gone in the past, because I was into keeping, and then I got out of it, and I recently got back into it in 2023. And yeah, I'd like to go again, just because I mean the cool thing about those huge shows is the amount of people that go,
Yeah,
so you can meet up with people that you've only talked to, through messaging or on social media.
yeah,
It's a great opportunity, and to see so many cool
absolutely.
things.
Yeah, I met so many people at Tinley that I only talked to on social media, and like I'm a little older, so I like face to face talks too. I mean, I like to meet the person I'm talking to and be able to see them. And you can read a person a little better, and they can read you that way. So
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same way. I love talking to people in person. I mean,
yeah,
we went to Tampa Repticon, and I didn't know Ron St. Pierre was going to be there, and I saw the fairy tale dragons table, and I'm like, oh my god,
I,
he's sitting right there. Let me go up
I saw
and
him at
badger him.
Tinley. I had a similar feeling. I had to say something to him because he's always wearing some heavy metal shirt. I'm like an old metal punk rock skateboard, you know what I mean? And I walked by him, and I was like, this guy's never worn a bad T-shirt in his life, or something like that. He got a kick out of that. I thought it was great because, he's a great freaking lizard breeder, man. I mean, like, can't deny his accomplishments. That's for sure.
No, yeah, he's like, and I mean, yeah, he's definitely one of the greats here, and I mean, especially
Super
doing
friendly.
everything he does in Florida outdoors, and
Uh huh.
yeah, and just such a good guy too, such a great guy to talk to.
Yeah, my girlfriend was like, "What else he breed?" I was like, "Everything,
Yeah, sit
anything you've
down.
ever heard of, pretty much."
Yeah. Yep, and he does it all outside, almost all
Yeah,
outside. It's pretty wild. All right, man. Well, JD, it was great talking to you, and thanks for coming on. And
yeah. Thanks for
hopefully you'll come out to Daytona, or I'll come up to Tinley or something, and we'll meet up at some point.
yeah. We'll see each other somewhere, I'm sure.
Hell yeah, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hell yeah.